Just call us Sherlock Holmes because, guys, we were so close with all of our theories. Kristen here, and we are talking about the finale of Pretty Little Liars Summer School. It has been a wild ride this season. A was captured, put in prison, and sentenced to death row, so it seemed like our liars were finally safe, right? Think again. A new villain arrived to ruin their hot girl summers in the form of Bloody Rose. I want to start out first with what I thought really worked about this season. The biggest being our liars. I just feel like they really picked the perfect ladies to lead this series. My favorite moments are just when they're together, whether they're supporting each other, whether they're planning a killer party, or just running from a killer. Bailee Madison really anchors this series and has just proved time and time again why she belongs in horror, why she's a rising scream queen. But I really do think that this show also allows our other liars a chance to shine as well. Zaria has quickly become a fan favorite as Farron. I love seeing her journey to finding her own strength, and she just really kicked butt this whole season. Like, literally at one point, she kicks Bloody Rose straight in the face. Our resident horror girl, Tabby, is really trying to open up after facing such intense trauma last season from someone that she thought she could trust, and, is trying to learn, can she trust again? She also goes full badass in this finale and shows Bloody Rose up with her own horror expertise. I've been loving Mouse and Ash's relationship, but I do wish that we got to see a bit more of Mouse outside of her spooky spaghetti watch. And even Noah, I feel like she's the only liar in this season that actually had a lie, but I do wish that they handled some of her story a little bit differently. I just want them to take these stories a bit further, because I do feel like in season 1 some of the characters had a lot more depth and a lot going on, and they did have lies that they were focused on, whereas in season 2 there were some people that I think that they definitely pushed them further. Like, I loved Farron's journey, but then I feel like characters like Mouse and Noah, who did have strong sections in season 1, kind of fell to the side a little bit this season. And this is really just more in terms of the writing. I think that they can go so much further in all of this because the actors are really giving their all. Another thing I loved about this season was the vibes, the aesthetic. A Final Girl Summer is just so much fun. I love the sets and the color schemes and the costumes and the soundtrack. I love that they went Bananarama Cruel Summer versus Taylor Swift Cruel Summer. I think it added to those nostalgic 80s slasher vibes. And the breadcrumbs that we got, I feel like we were teased with all of this stuff that I think in the long run did pay off, especially those cool assets like the Final Girls poster that we were able to analyze, and it just helped us theorize what was going on. I think things like that worked really well, and it really had me invested this season trying to figure out who done it, and I think we got pretty close. Speaking of that, let's talk about what we were last theorizing about. I had felt that Dr. Sullivan and Mrs. Beasley were red herrings. We had also discussed the idea of multiple villains. I kept looking at this Final Girl poster and the fact that there were 3 people around Tabby. We'd already talked about, could she be a sacrifice in some kind of way? And then we were really leaning in last week to the idea of, what if this is a horror movie being filmed with the liars at its center? And the biggest suspect for me at that point was Christian. This season we already knew was focused on Tabby as our final girl. He was a new love interest for her. He quickly filled in Chip's spot as the horror-loving, mask-making co-worker at the Orpheum. He even made Bloody Rose and A masks. That's a huge red flag! What I had ultimately come up with after all our theorizing was Christian, maybe in honor of Chip, and then I threw in Wes for good measure because of, the horror movie vibes. And we almost got it, so let's break it down. This episode focuses on Tabby in her final girl moment. As predicted in that poster, they're planning a blood sacrifice. But it's not quite the cults that they teased. This was another red herring that I feel like just wasted our time, because they kept teasing that the church had this weird cult situation going on, and then they completely dropped that. And instead, if we had just been paying attention to what Christian was talking about, we could have figured this out a whole lot earlier. Because Christian is the one who reveals to us that pretty much anyone could have made a mask that looks like a person, meaning you don't need to have talent. Talk about a burn. We know that Bloody Rose has been setting up these Final Girl challenges for the liars and killing off these super minor characters. And my biggest struggle with her as a villain was why? I just did not understand what her motivation was. Why is she killing off people we barely know, like Nick and Sabrina and Sandy and Pastor Malachi? Why are the challenges so lackluster, like running across a bed of thorny roses or holding up a metal beam? I thought that was kind of lame. And with that background knowledge, the reveal of the killer makes a lot more sense.
Tell the truth about my son. Confess your lies.
Mrs. Linksbury.
Who else?
it was the dual team of Mrs. Langsbury and Wes. We've been well aware of Mrs. Langsbury's potential motives. She clearly hates Imogen and Tabby because they spoke the truth about what happened to them. They accused her son Chip of assaulting them, and she doesn't want to accept it. Even Mrs. Beasley was suspicious of her. They share that after Chip's death, Wes went to go bring some items from his locker at work to his mom, and they just started bonding, and they formed this plan to take down the girls in a sort of form of revenge because Mrs. Langsbury wants to clear Chip's name, even though he did what he did. And Wes wants to make the ultimate horror movie. While Bloody Rose was executing these kills, it was really Wes who was the mastermind or the director behind all of this. He's the one who created Spooky Spaghetti. He put together this sort of Bloody Rose cult in order to pull in actors and proxies to move forward with his plan. So the ultimate result of Tabby's Final Girl Challenge was learning that this was a whole movie production set up to be live streamed called The Reckoning, to do some sort of innovative filmmaking and make a name for Wes while also immortalizing Tabby's story as a black final girl, which I thought was messed up for him to even want to do that and kind of put that on himself, like, look at what I'm doing for you, Tabby. It's like, you're crazy. I will say, I thought that the location they set up for Tabby's Final Girl test was really cool. Being in the church with, the big tapestries of everything that's happened to the girls and, all the masks and the live streaming. Like, it was definitely very epic and creepy. But, he essentially set up this whole fake Bloody Rose cult movie. And we've already established that Wes is this mediocre white guy filmmaker who's threatened by Tabby and her talent.
It's hard for young white guys trying to break in right now. The doors just don't fly open like they used to because they're too busy opening up for people like you.
There's even a moment where we learn this season that Wes also makes masks like Christian, but just not as good. Even though Derek Klena, who plays Wes, has been more of a side character, I thought he gave a really strong performance in this finale episode. And I loved seeing Chandler Kinney come in as Tabby, just kicking butt, using her horror knowledge to outwit Wes, and doubling down on her truth to Mrs. Langsbury. I don't know if this was actually done on purpose, but I do feel like looking back at, the way the kills were done, the way the challenges were done, I had felt that they were lackluster this season, and finding out that Wes was the one behind them, it feels like a character choice of, this guy's not really that good of a filmmaker. And so, while it is scary to have somebody targeting you and going after you, like, he wasn't coming up with really cool creative ideas. And I thought that tied back in well to him just, like, not being as talented as Tabby. This whole thing reminded me of a mixture of Scream 2 and Scream 4, because in Scream 4 they bring up that idea of live streaming, and then in Scream 2 you had the villains as this horror expert and the mother of a previous villain having teamed up. I will say, though, something I thought was a missed opportunity here is that they recorded Bloody Rose's kills and they were live streaming Tabby's Final Girl moment, but it didn't look like they had filmed all the attacks on the other liars, which I think would have been really interesting because it could have showed throughout the entire season that someone was making this movie, and also given us a bit more of a solid motivation for, like, why is Bloody Rose doing this, because I felt like the whole season I didn't understand what she was doing, whereas last season we knew from the beginning that A was after justice. All in all, though, I did enjoy this season, and I did like this episode overall. There were some people who were on my radar, but I wasn't sure, and so then I was surprised by what ultimately ended up happening, and I was sad to see that that actually ended up ruining Johnny and Imogen's relationship, because I was rooting for them. But I was glad to see that Christian ended up being innocent in the end, because, Tabby needed that one win of at least knowing that she trusted somebody that was worthwhile. I also really like that little Easter egg where Christian's last name was Peele in honor of Jordan Peele. I also felt like there was a lot of fun moments in this episode.
He looks exactly like Jeffrey Dahmer. You guys have the randos, okay?
I mean, honestly, it could be.
my
I'm sure
God.
it's not my girl.
She's the killer.
Monty, what about her?
Stop.
And even some of the people we thought we could trust after everything, like Dr. Sullivan, still came out as sort of villainous in the end with their own motivation. So, like, even though she wasn't a killer, she calls the girls narcissistic and plans to move forward with her book about them despite everything they've been through. This episode does end on a few cliffhangers. Wes and Mrs. Langsbury live and are arrested. The fact that they're still around could mean that they could come back for more revenge. Tabby decides that she wants to move on. She's not going to rehash this story in her own film. She wants to create something completely new. A new story, a new villain, something bigger, badder, bolder. And we see clips of these masked figures. They're wearing the liars' faces. I initially thought that that could tease like they're in their villain era, or could maybe just show that this is a teaser of what Tabby would be working on in her next film. But there was an interview with the creators on TV Line that I thought shared some very interesting insight of what they could do, which is what if there was a group of disgruntled Spooky Spaghetti fans who now wanted to go after the girls dressed as them. Almost like The Purge meets like the doppelgangers of Us, which I'm a big fan of Us, so I think that would be very interesting. The episode also ends with the tease that A is back. We had seen that there was a prison riot at Ravenswood Penitentiary, another callback to Pretty Little Liars of the past.
We're here at the Ravenswood Penitentiary in the aftermath of a violent riot that broke out here late last night.
Ravenswood Penitentiary, that's where A's being held.
And everyone thought that A was killed in the riot, but it looks like he actually escaped. And his first victim, now that he's free, is Dr. Sullivan. I gotta say, like, even in the first season, A was never, like, fully targeting the girls. He was sort of getting justice around them, you know, justice against their moms, justice against even people that had hurt them. And I mean, look, he's the one that killed Chip because of what Chip had done. So I wonder if we were seeing, let's say, these disgruntled Spooky Spaghetti fans, what if they're going after the girls and A is sort of like their serial killer protector? There's a lot of places we could go in a potential third season. I just hope we get one. This cast really, really deserves it, but I would like to see things just be taken to the next level. I want higher stakes, I want bigger kills. This is something that I also felt in the first season. We're not really seeing people be killed off that we care about. I think back on characters like Eddie Munson in Stranger Things. Joseph Quinn was in one season, but he had such a huge impact. And I think it's a combination of, you know, he's a great actor, but also the writing was there. They made him a meaty character, they made you care about him. And then, spoiler alert, when he was killed, it really had an impact on you. And I think that is what is missing from this show. They have the actors. I think they just need to take the stories to the next level. They do it on shows like Chucky, who also have the same number of episodes. I think they have a strong fan base. I think they have a lot of really cool, like, clues and things that are being dropped, and I think they really can take this series to a whole nother level and keep it going for many seasons to come. I would love to know what you thought about this episode and also just the overall season. What did you think about the reveal of who Bloody Rose is? Let me know in the comments. Consider subscribing if you like this video and get even more entertainment news at popcultureplanet.net. See ya!